I don't know what you all call a comic book fan. I'm going to tell you what I did. When I was in the third and fourth grade in Boca Raton, Florida, I would ride my bike up to the local bookstore and I would sit my butt down on the carpet and I would read through all the comic books they had on their wire stand there, along with all the book versions of collections of Mad Magazine. And I would do that every single day after school, after I was done not doing anything in school. I would head over there, and they didn't mind me just sitting down for 3 hours reading their stuff. And so it got to a point where, at that age, all of my allowance money, any kind of birthday money, Christmas gifts, anything, went to comic books. The one thing that I wanted, my father hated. My father liked to pick out gifts. He didn't like to be told what to buy, right? And so this is amazing this happened, but I asked X-Men number 94 was a Christmas gift. And so, I had acquired, by the time I basically quit collecting comic books in the 6th or 7th grade, because it drove me fucking crazy because I couldn't keep up with getting everything I needed, right? It became this obsession. I had already amassed like 4 long boxes full of comics. Back then, a thrill and pleasure and ultimate adventure for me would be to get my babysitter who I collected comics to drive me to a comic book store so I could just sit there and pour through the quarter boxes, which used to be these long boxes of comics that were all a quarter. And so to this day, I still have like all these beat up, raggedy issues of like Doctor Strange and just strange Marvel team ups and all this weird stuff, and even Justice League. This stuff that basically was just so beat up and torn to shreds that nobody wanted it. But then, the price tag on it was 35 cents, and it was from the 60s. Early 70s. But anyway, that's where I'm coming from. And so besides being in the bookstore, reading these comics, I'd be at home reading the comics. And I read every single comic I ever bought because that was just my rule. And I'm telling you all this first to show that this was just me. I didn't have any friends that liked this stuff. Nobody else liked this stuff. In fact, I used to daydream. When I wasn't reading comics, I would daydream about a cartoon, other than Spider-Man, and there was a Saturday morning X-Men cartoon. Other than that, I would dream about what a X-Men movie would be like. Would dream about it in my mind and just lay it all out. All these kind of Marvel movies, because Marvel was my thing. That was my thing. Just wasn't super into DC. As a little kid, I liked Marvel. And guess who? In the rest of the world, decided to agree with me. 30 years later. I'm sorry, more than that. My point here is that, so we have the movies coming along, right? But in terms of what made a great comic book, I'm amazed to this day of what actually became a successful movie. Because if you would have told me Thor, okay, I'm gonna tell you like this. And again, we're going back to 8, 9-year-old, 10-year-old, 11-year-old, 12-year-old. Spider-Man and X-Men were where it's at. And now I'm gonna suspect even for some older people too. X-Men were where it's at. So I'm gonna explain this. Spider-Man, you have basically a dork, a nerd, right? Superpowers, who makes lots of jokes. It's very funny. It's entertaining to read. Spider-Man is the most feel-good, entertaining, amazing Spider-Man. Okay, the Amazing Spider-Man series. It's the most feel-good, awesome comic book to read. I ended up getting into the gifted program in 5th grade, taken shortly out in 6th grade, due to failing grades. But it boosted my vocabulary by this enormous amount. It outweighed everything that I failed on the nonverbal portion. But I mean, it just was amazing for me, and I loved it. Spider-Man, the most feel-good comic. X-Men. So X-Men, you have the difference. The thing with X-Men is that it had a very modern feel, and we're going to say modern, even going back to like the 80s when I was reading it, and then of course came out long before that. But the thing about it is that the whole idea of when I was a kid, it was a little corny. A family goes to outer space and they get all sorts of powers. Or that Fantastic Four shit was corny. It always, and they're always wearing a 4 on their chest and that shit. But the idea of you're a regular old loser and you hit puberty and you get Velt powers, and it's happening randomly to different people, regardless of who they are, where they come from. That's exciting to a young person. You don't have to do well in school. You don't have to be an accomplished person in sports or anything else. You just might randomly wake up and start like being able to like shoot shit out of your fingers. And so yeah, and besides that, it had very dark, very sort of like kind of feel going on that also was intriguing, and just X-Men was great, and it was of course it was the balance there to the feel good aspect of Spider-Man. Now, if you look at what the movies became, the movies that came out, I would have never guessed. I would have bet against everything that's ever happened. Everything. The Avengers, I never enjoyed reading Avengers comics. I liked the fact that there was like different characters. Every single Marvel character was in the Avengers, by the way. It's like at one point, every fucking character was in the Avengers. Every character in the Marvel universe was in the Avengers at some point. And so you just pick your time period, And so the Avengers, that's fine, but it didn't really. I liked West Coast Avengers, believe it or not. Maybe it was because of the time period it was new and it was coming out, and so that's kind of funny that I said that. But things like Thor and Iron Man. Let's look at this. Thor was just so strange, and I knew what Thor was. I understood. I'm a smart kid. I understood Thor was a god, but it just didn't make. Thor came across the way Thor would come across to all of you right now if they just eliminated all the humor from the movies. So look at the first two movies basically without any humor, and that's the way Thor comes across, because Thor's kind of humorless. He's an asshole who drinks. He's a Viking, right? And so before Vikings were sexy, there's Vikings, and Iron Man. This is a guy with a cheesy ass mustache. Yeah, in the comics he's a mustache. There's no goatees. No kind of Robert Downey Jr. with his his endearing way of speaking, like kind of a dork / know-it-all, and it's just Tony Stark with his slick hair, looking like somebody who fucks around on his wife, with his little mustache. You know what I mean? Saying he's, for the Magnum PI crowd, and just like, who's he supposed to appeal to, right? And then he's the super rich guy, and he gets dressed up in a bunch of armor, and then it was that old dated sort of superhero thing, and just kind of it didn't appeal, because again I'm coming across it as a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, but you know what? I didn't. To my knowledge, because I was paying attention to the older guys that were reading comic books, like my babysitter, and they weren't into that shit either. Iron Man was not a popular comic. It was not a popular comic. It did not sell well. Old issues of Iron Man sold for nothing. I'm sure they still do. And so again, and same thing with Avengers. Never. Those are the comics in the quarter boxes. Seriously. And so Marvel comes around, they bring around what? They bring around Thor, Captain America. That old, the way they reinvented him was amazing, right? It's just insanely great job. And Iron Man, and made them the most, those movies were phenomenal, and they were amazing. And I was so happy about it, because, I still have those, I still have those Iron Man. I had those comics. I'm sitting there talking shit about. I had them, and I still have them. But I just can't believe they became huge hit movies, and they pull it off, and they still keep pulling it off. And it's amazing to me. You all right, dog? But that's my whole take on where I come from with comic books and this whole thing. And I would seriously dream of the way an adolescent boy fantasizes, or even grown men fantasize about just like, a woman. I'd fantasize about a comic book movies, a Marvel movie, an X-Men movie, and just exactly how it would be done. And have everything worked out in my head day in and day out, all the time. And I couldn't believe it when these movies come out. And I was like, God damn it. You know what? They're coming out fucking 30 years after I fucking decided I want nothing to do with comic books anymore. But I still enjoy them. I still remember it enough. I still do. But, I'm glad everyone else loves it. But it's just amazing that things have happened the way they've happened. And I haven't followed comic books or looked at a single one of them or anything that's come out since the 80s. That's just how I am. I haven't played a video game since Super Nintendo. So, what can I say?